Well, the Bolts continue to pick up big wins. Can we expect Sergachev back in the lineup, as well as Vazzy showing us some vintage performances? All that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Locked On Lightning. Just a reminder that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet that wins. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started on this episode. We're talking about a big win over the weekend over the Panthers. The Lightning continue to pick up impressive wins. We take a look at vintage Vasilevskiy doing what he needs to do to get this team towards the playoffs, and not only towards the playoffs, but to be playoff ready. We also talk about Sergachev. Could he possibly be back sooner rather than later? We'll talk about that all today. But first, I just want to remind you, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead and subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified, and drop a comment below. How'd you feel about this game? I felt phenomenal about it because Tampa Bay Lightning, as we have stated, probably to exhaustion for some of you, over the pretty much last week, going into last week against that matchup against the Rangers. Excuse me. They have a lot on their plate within the next week, and not only within the next week, within the next month or so. And it cannot be understated or overstated or said enough, or however you would like to put it. It can't be said enough how important this stretch of games are going to be for this team, because at this time it kind of looks like Toronto's starting to pull away. Then again, we're talking only about a 7-point deficit that the Lightning have to make up. They're going to have to pick up a little bit more in their performance, or at least stay consistent as to where they've been the last couple of days. But going from picking up a big win against the Rangers, prior to that, the Flyers, and then after that Ranger win this past weekend against the Panthers, it has really awakened, I think, a fire in Lightning fans. I think it has really taken the optimism of the fan base to a whole new level, one that we have not seen this whole season, and rightfully so, because when you look at the performance of this team, they are currently playing the best hockey that, in my opinion, they have played all season long. Not only are they going out and beating teams, they're going out and beating the best, and they are going out and kicking their butts. And, sometimes the stats or the score may not necessarily reflect that, but I think, in my opinion, you look at the early starts of these games. I mean, even if you want to talk about the Flyers game or the Rangers game, whichever way you want to go with that, the Lightning are starting off these games with a ton of intensity consistently, in which we have not seen all season long. And that goes to show you that for the time being, until that changes, which I think at this point in time, what you see is what you get. I don't know how much better this team could really get, or, how much worse they could get. But they are going out there and playing with a ferocity that really, I can't really think back on the season as to when they've done that consistently. And that shows that this team is ready for the playoffs. You look at this game over the weekend on Saturday, they really just went out there and took it to the Panthers right away. You saw everything they were doing. They were pulling all the bag of tricks out. Stamkos, Esamont, Radish, Stamkos again later on. Kucherov on the empty netter. I mean, if you want to throw that in there, that's phenomenal. But really what it comes down to it is that, and it goes back to the old point that I have stated many times on this show, that when everybody's involved and it's people that normally we are not seeing or really that we don't highlight as the main guys that the Lightning go to for production on this team, that shows how well this team is playing all around. And I always say that equates to that this team opens up opportunities for each other. So that was really the huge takeaway for me from this. The big glaring thing that really needs to be fixed, because we saw this in the prior game a little bit. We've seen this in other games as well here and there throughout this pretty impressive winning streak, is their lack of shots at times. Just doing whatever they can to just weather the storm. In their second and third period, they had 5 shots total between the 2 periods. Obviously, that's very alarming. It almost to a certain degree, I will say, makes this win all that more impressive. And it also makes you wonder if they actually got off enough shots. How possibly different of a gap or a deficit the Panthers would have been behind once this game ended. Just the total shots on net for both teams. Florida had 50. The Lightning had 16. So obviously that is not something that we could brush off. Because, that's something that we've seen over the last couple of games in certain periods. To have it into 2 consecutive periods to end the game, regardless win or loss, that's something that needs to be addressed immediately. But overall, very good game, very all-around good performance from this team. And coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about Vasilevskiy making a vintage performance, or appearance, as I like to have called it. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about what that means for this Lightning team down the stretch, and really how much of that, because as we all know, he used to be this great Vezina Trophy contender on a yearly basis. Now he has really been mediocre all year, making a phenomenal save and really doing everything he can. Like I said, the Lightning not getting off on a lot of shots in those last 2 periods, whereas the Panthers had 38 total in those last 2 periods. What does that mean for the Lightning? Could he be making a change of pace in his performance? We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about the first of our 2 sponsors today on today's show, and that is our friends over at Robinhood Retirement. Now, did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you could still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started with Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info, client claims as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button so if you are subscribed, so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified of that episode, and you could go ahead, watch it, listen to it, comment below the video. Let me know your questions. I saw some questions over the weekend. I'm going to hold those over until tomorrow's episode. So don't worry. If you answered a question in one of our past videos over the last 2, those questions will be addressed. So hang tight for those. So we just got done talking about a very good game from the Tampa Bay Lightning, a game in which really they showed a lot of offensive muscle early on, and then that kind of quickly dissipated as the game went on. And obviously, in that case, when that does happen, regardless if you're the Lightning or if you're another team, you're always kind of looking at your goaltender. We're playing like crap right now. The puck possession game is not going the way we want it to go. We need you to help us. And that has been the thing for me, at least for some of this season. The attitude has been, well, in years past, Vasilevskiy has the Lightning have needed Vasilevskiy to bail them out of situations. Part of the season, especially when he came back, I felt like it was the other way around. The Lightning really needed to bail him out. Obviously, he hasn't had it. But I even have said it more and more often over the past couple of weeks, is that as much as that statement is true, we still live in the world where this guy makes close to $10 million a year. Okay. And I hate throwing that out there, but facts are facts. I mean, especially in this day and age of Lightning hockey where the cap space is so very thin, guys need to justify their salaries really on a nightly basis. I'm not saying that Vasilevskiy is going to go anywhere. That's not something that's going to happen, but still, like every other person that shows up to play for this team, he needs to go out there and play like a $9.5 million goaltender. And he did that the other night. It wasn't pretty, but he still did that. He did that against a very good hockey team, a hockey team that could very well go on and win the Stanley Cup this year. And I think for what this team was giving him in front of them, I think he did beyond expectations. I think in games past, especially earlier this year, we could have seen a very different scenario in this. We could have seen something where the Florida Panthers, they fire off 38 shots in those last two periods. Past games with Vasilevskiy not at his best, I'm saying he gives up probably 5 goals, maybe even more. Probably gets pulled. You got Johansson coming in. Most likely wouldn't do a better job than he would. And it's a total disaster on the road after, you have 2 very good wins in a row. And you're about to begin this big time road streak. And you absolutely get murdered once again by your divisional foes and your in-state foes as well. But that didn't happen. Like I said, it wasn't pretty. He did a boneheaded Vasilevskiy move, trying to clear the puck, having no absolute awareness of where anybody is, taking his sweet time to clear it, and it leads to a goal, which is something that we talk about all the time on this show. That is something that's going to need really, again, because this happened last year, it's going to need to be addressed. But at the same time, regardless of how you feel about he played overall, and when I say vintage Vasilevskiy, I mean he put this team on his back. Was he making huge highlight-worthy saves? There was probably 1 or 2 that we could say with clear confidence that was something that we used to see back in the day, maybe a couple of seasons ago. But really, this was just doing the little things. This was just a game of going back to basics, just making the saves, and that's what it was. And that's what the Lightning need. And that's what the Lightning are going to need down the stretch as they head into Vegas, as they play a bunch of juggernaut-level hockey teams over the next couple of weeks. They got Toronto coming up in a couple of weeks. They have Boston. They have the Islanders, a team that's coming, that's trying to get back into the mix and definitely has their eyes set on them. Detroit, who's faltering, but still shouldn't take them lightly. You have other teams that you have struggled against this year, that those are going to be dogfight games, all fighting for playoff spots for the most part. And you're going to need what we saw from the other night from Vasilevskiy. And that was just going back to square one, making the saves, and occasionally making highlight-worthy saves. So really what it comes down to it is that this guy went above and beyond the other night. And it is very, very positive to see from Andrei Vasilevskiy this performance. And if you don't agree with me, let me know in the comments below, because I'm very curious as to other than that goal that he let in where he turned over the puck behind the net, which was something really, if you've been watching him for the last couple of years, not really something that should be that all surprising. But when it comes down to it, the guy made 47 saves out of 50 possible shots. And his team really kind of just, regardless of the goals that they scored later on, I mean, they scored 2 goals on 3 shots in the second period. That's what kind of game it was. Any other night, that probably wouldn't have worked out. And if Vasilevskiy doesn't play well, it 100% wouldn't have worked out. And then they score an empty netter in the third period. So if you even want to go ahead and count that, that's entirely up to you. But if this performance wasn't as satisfactory for you as maybe it was for other Lightning fans, I want to know, because really at this point in time, we are in March. This is March 18th. Now, if this is October, or if this is November, or even or December or January, okay, like, we could critique, we could criticize. But at the same time, it is March. At this point, what you kind of see is what you get out of these guys, especially 88. And we just have to accept that these kind of performances from him are really the ceiling. Now, as for if that is enough for a potential playoff run, and especially to be successful down this last stretch of the season, is that okay for us? Even if it's not pretty? I think a lot of us could agree that it would be. I think we could all agree that really this version of Andrei Vasilevskiy might very well be the version we get for the rest of his career. And I know that may piss off a lot of people, but that is really the fact of the matter right now. So let me know in the comments below, because it's very interesting, because I saw some people on on Twitter. I saw some others, I believe it was probably, maybe it was Reddit. It was on another platform. There were some of you that weren't happy. I don't know if those of you that comment were necessarily fans of this show, but if you were, no shame in speaking up. And if you were pissed off about at that point in time how he played, or not as in love with that performance as maybe some of us were, but you've changed your mind, tell me what's changed. What has made you switch sides in terms of how you feel about this? Is it the fact what I said, that what you see is what you get at this point in time, and we just have to accept that's what it is? And that was a great performance given the circumstances. And the Lightning need to do better. And that's crazy to say, considering they won this game. And it's a huge win. It's a huge win, and everybody should be happy about this. But in a best of 7, that might win you 2 games, especially against very good teams. Especially that the Lightning might play a very good team in the opening round of the playoffs, most likely. Not sure who it's going to be yet, but that's TBD. So let me know in the comments below. We'll continue to talk about this probably to exhaustion, because the fact of the matter is that other than for those back-to-back games in Canada, Vazzy's going to play the rest of the season. I'm sure some of us, including me, I know for sure me, pretty much would like to see Johansson here and there towards the end of the season. But we all know Cooper, he's going to play Vazzy as much as possible before the season ends. And Vasilevskiy is not going to let him sit him unless it's a back-to-back. So we'll be watching that situation as that involves, and if hopefully this is the start of something phenomenal for Andrei Vasilevskiy down the stretch of the NHL season. So coming up in just a little bit, surprising video on social media today showed us Mikhail Sergachev skating on the ice. What does that mean? I mean, we saw a video I think it was Friday, even Saturday. He was in a pool. He was running in a pool. And now he's skating around. Now, granted, it looked like he was by himself, but he was skating. He was taking some turns, looked pretty solid. What does that mean for the Lightning? What does that mean for him? How soon can we see him? We're talking about all that in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about our last friends and sponsors of the day. And that is our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney, whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed. It's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on your point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Go ahead, subscribe to our channel there, hit that thumbs up button, and drop a comment below. I mean, a lot to talk about until tomorrow night when the Lightning will be in Vegas playing the Golden Knights. But still a lot to talk about. We go from beating the Panthers, Vasilevskiy kind of looking like he's back, putting the Lightning on his shoulders in that game on Saturday. And then all on top of it, Mikhail Sergachev looks like he's back to probably, I would say 40%, maybe 50 if you want to push it. But that was incredible. I think it's been like 40-something days, 48 days, something like that, when he broke his leg in New York. That was just a gruesome injury. Got surgery, but still, I mean, regardless of, the surgery, it's not always a guarantee, even though we've seen it numerous times with players in hockey. Killorn a couple of years ago during the Cup run. It's one of those things where still you can't believe that human beings are able to do, hockey players, because I can't think of another sport where someone comes back this fast from broken bones, let alone in their leg. And not only is he running in a pool, but today he's skating around, and one can't help but wonder, what does that mean for the Lightning? Are we going to see this guy in the playoffs? When it was initially spoken about, it was probably when he got the surgery. It was spoken about, when is he going to be back? When exactly could it be the playoffs? And obviously it's going to have to be the playoffs. And I think that's probably the plan, because I mean, they don't have any room for him. They don't have any cap space. Unless they do some lineup finagling from now until the end of the season, whether that involves, I don't know, Calvin DeHaan, and even though that's probably, I don't know how much money he has left on his contract off the top of my head, but I would imagine it's going to just monetarily not going to be able to work out for the time being. And having said that, it's very optimistic, because without Sergachev and the Lightning, it really is tough for this team. They're currently trying to figure out who they are without him. And that's one of the things that I love and hate when, in recent years, the Lightning, whether it's this year with Sergachev or was it years ago with Kucherov, when you miss a guy who is that much of an integral part to your team, it takes a lot of experimenting for you to get things right in order to stay successful. And it kind of worries me when guys come back, especially for the playoffs, after being out so long. And it worries me because when you look at these guys that are still here trying to keep everything from falling apart while said player is gone for a pretty good amount of time, it's tough because those guys are kind of figuring out who they are. They're gelling together in a way to where for the time being they're in their minds in this state of mind that this guy will not be back. And then once that player comes back, I will say, maybe not in a catastrophic way, but still, maybe defensively it could be in a different way. It can throw things off, and it can throw other guys' rhythms off. And I'm not by any means saying Sergachev is going to screw things up for Lightning. Absolutely not. Unless he comes back and he is not up to where he should be, then that's a whole nother scenario. And that's really not so much on him. I mean, it is, but at the same time, it's also on John Cooper. It's on the training staff. It's, there's a lot of blame to go around in that case. But I will say it would be very interesting once he does come back. What does that mean for other players on this team, especially the defensive side of things, of course? Because you look at that first line pairing, that's as good as a pairing that the Lightning have rolled out all season long. Victor Hedman sort of looks like he's back to his old self. His numbers are starting to kind of resemble that, at least in the offensive side of things. And on the other side, his line mate, Darren Radich, looks phenomenal. So I think that really it's not going to throw many things off. Now, the conversation could be had when Sergachev gets back. Because I have really, and some people may not like this, and this is fine. Wouldn't be the first time I said something people didn't like. I've really liked how Hayden Fleury has played over the last couple of weeks. I really have. It may not be overly impressive, but he's just there doing things that need to be done. And whether it's a sexy thing to see on the ice or not, and he wouldn't be playing on the second line if he was not doing his job. And the fact that Nick Pervix is out of the lineup pretty much shows you that as well, because I think John Cooper was tired of trying to beat the Nick Pervix love into everybody, and look how that worked out. And I think the conversation could be had with the season that Chernak's had. If Sergachev comes back and he's ready to go, like he's ready to get back to where he was, I think the conversation could be had that you put Cernak on that third line with Dumba. And you put Sergachev with Fleury. And I think if this team is still along the lines of where they are right now, I don't think that's too much of an outlandish statement to say. So let me know in the comments below, because that is something that I think that very much should be explored. I think there's a good number of Lightning fans out there that would agree with me. And I think that is the best case scenario for this Lightning team down the stretch in the playoffs, especially if Sergachev comes back in time. So let me know in the comments below about that, and we'll be back tomorrow to talk more. Hopefully, who knows? Cernak might be training for a marathon tomorrow. Who the hell knows? This guy's dropping videos every other day about, his updates, which is awesome. I love to see it. And it really, I think it gives a lot of positivity towards the fan base nowadays with social media. You're not just one day you wake up and, oh man, this guy's ready to go. You kind of get that buildup. So that's great to see. Let me know how you feel about Vazzy and how you felt about Saturday's game and how you feel about Tuesday night's game against the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll be back to talk about that as well as answer some of your questions. But in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I'll talk to you in the next one.